Now moving forward, let's discuss a few more points. Now let's say we have these two lines. This is line L1 and this is line L2, and let's say this is your angular bisector. This is first and this is second. This is second. This is bisector 1 and let's say this is bisector 2. Now let's say this bisector has divided this angle into half of theta theta. Now if this is 2 theta, this angle would be 180 minus 2 theta, and this is 180 minus 2 theta. Therefore this angle would be what? Half of that, 90 minus theta and 90 minus theta. Now if you look closely, what is the angle between these two bisectors? This was your second bisector and this was your first bisector. This was your first bisector and this was your second. The angle between these two bisectors is this, and which is what? Theta plus 90 minus theta. Therefore the angle between the bisectors is what? 90 degree. Therefore the second point that we should note is angular bisectors between two lines will be perpendicular to each other. Will be perpendicular to each other. Okay, that is, if this point is O, B2 O B1 is what? 90 degree. That is, the angle between the perpendicular bisectors will always be 90 degree. That is, angle between the perpendicular bisectors will be 90 degree. Okay. The third point that we should consider is, let's say this is L1, this is L2, this is one of your bisectors, and this is the other bisector B2, this is B1. Now this is theta, this is theta. We have already said this is 90 minus theta, this is 90 minus theta. This is B2, this is B1. Now we have said that the angle between the two bisectors is 90 degree. The third point is, in general, L1 and L2 will not bisect the bisectors B1 and B2. That is, these lines L1 and L2 will not bisect B1 and B2. This angle is what? Theta. This is theta. Now this line, let's draw this line. This L1 line. This L1 line and L2 line will not be the bisectors of B1 and B2. That is, it is not necessary that this angle is equal to this angle. In general, this will not be true. L1 will not bisect B1 and B2. Neither will L2. This angle and this angle may or may not be equal. The only case when they will be equal is when L1 and L2 are perpendicular. L1 and L2 will bisect B1 and B2 only when L1 and L2 are perpendicular to each other. We can see this fact. Suppose our lines L1 and L2 are perpendicular. If the lines are perpendicular, this is, let's say, L1, this is L2. Now what would be the bisector? This would be the bisector and this would be the bisector. This angle would be what? 45 and 45. This angle will also be 45 and 45. Now if you see, this is, let's say, bisector 1, this is bisector 2. The angle between the bisectors is 90 degree. It is okay. But if you see, this L2 line is bisecting the angle between B1 and B2, 45, 45. Similarly, L1 is bisecting the angle between B1 and B2. So when the lines are perpendicular to each other, then the bisectors will be, the equation of bisectors will be bisected by L1 and L2. Otherwise, in general, L1 and L2 will not bisect B1 and B2. Okay. Now the next point is, suppose we have two lines L1 and L2, and let's say these are its two bisectors, this and this are its two bisectors. This is, let's say, B1 and this is B2. Now if the lines are being bisected, one of the angle would be the acute, let's say this is theta, this is theta, and this would be 90 minus theta, 90 minus theta. Now if this angle, let's say L2OL1 is acute angle, then let's say this is A. Therefore AOL2 will be the obtuse angle between the lines. Now obviously B1 will then be what? The acute angled bisector. The bisector which is bisecting the acute angle will be called acute angled bisector, and B2 will be called the obtuse angled bisector. Obtuse angled bisector. Now if the angle between L1 and L2 is 90 degree, then there is no question of acute and obtuse angle, because all the angles would be 90 degree. Therefore in that case, then no question of acute and obtuse angled bisector. Acute and obtuse angled bisector. Because if the angle between the lines is 90 degree, then both the angles would be 90 degree, because if the lines are perpendicular to each other, then all the angles are 90 degree. Therefore the angle between the lines will be 90 degree throughout. There will be no acute angle, no obtuse angle. Otherwise you will have one of the angle as acute, the other would be obtuse, and therefore you will have two types of bisectors, acute angled bisector and obtuse angled bisector. Now we are interested in finding these bisectors individually. That is, which one is the acute angled bisector, and which is the obtuse angled bisector. So there are two methods to this. There are two methods of finding which bisector is which. The first method is, find the equation of both the bisectors using the formula we have discussed earlier. Assume any bisector among the two, and assume any line of the two, that is L1 or L2, here B1 or B2. Step 3, find the angle between them. For example, if you take one of the bisectors B1 and one of the line L1, to find the angle between, let's say, B1 and L1. If tan theta, mod of tan theta is less than 1, then the bisector chosen is acute angled bisector. If tan theta mod, that is, we are only concerned with the value, is greater than 1, then the bisector chosen is obtuse angled bisector. Obviously the other one would be the acute one. Other bisector is the obtuse angled bisector. Here the other one would be means the one you have chosen becomes the obtuse angled, and therefore the other one becomes the acute angled bisector.